Today, we're going to be talking about something that is important for Meta that most people don't know about, and that is your bidding strategy and whether you should use bid caps, cost caps, highest volume, target cost, etc., and when is applicable. Most people that I see on the internet nowadays talking about this on Meta, I think they've got completely wrong, mostly because they think that there is one strategy that's going to win over the others. But realistically, if you understand them, you can use all of them in your Meta account or decide them based on the type of business that you have. What I mean by that is that you're going to have some businesses that naturally have a lower AOV, and it makes sense for you to, for example, use a cost cap on it. Whereas other businesses where you don't have that constraint, it makes less sense. But anyway, we'll get into it. You'll understand all three of them, four of them actually, and whether you should use them or not. So the first things first, when you set up a Meta ad, it will naturally be a highest volume bidding strategy. And that just means, or like it used to be called lowest cost. And that just means that Meta is going to try to get the lowest cost per action as it can. That's basically it. So you put $100 in there, it's going to basically tell you like, this works at this cost, this works at this cost, etc. And the more you try to scale, potentially the worse the cost is going to get because it's going to colder audiences. But that's basically the premise of it. With cost caps, what you're telling Meta is that here is the cost that I can allow. I want the cost to be on average this. So you're going to have some days that the cost goes lower, some days that the cost is higher, but and that's going to fluctuate. And naturally your spend is also going to fluctuate. Some days it can be high, some days it can be low. It depends on what Meta thinks that you can get the cost up to. I think cost caps are a great way to scale, especially in an efficient, like a very efficient way to scale. So you're going to set it, and you're only going to spend if Meta believes that you can get an average cost per result for that over a 7-day period. So it's very interesting. But if you use it a pure cost cap strategy, what can happen, doesn't always happen, but what can happen is that it's not going to spend because there is no way to get that result. And that typically is like your ads are not good enough. That can be one thing. Or your ads are not good enough, or your cost is too low. So if you have, for example, a product that the average order value is £50 or $50, whatever, and you put a cost cap of $5, like you're not going to get any sales. It's impossible because Meta is just saying like, there is no way for me to get this at this cost, so I'm not going to spend any money on it. So you do have to play around with the bid to see whether it makes sense or not. There's one other thing that people use this for, which I think is very interesting, is when you use an audience farm. So audiences, everybody knows that is it's a very old school way of scaling the account, and they don't work as well anymore. But what you can do is have individual audiences with individual caps on your best performing creatives, and then manually bid them up and down throughout the day. So for example, you would bid, let's say your target cost is 25. You can start the morning at a 30 bid and then lower that throughout the day, depending on the results that you're getting. And that way you can get like more results over different audiences that are not going to scale the business like to hundreds, thousands a month, but you get to spend more money. And that's a very interesting way of doing. It's kind of a media buyer hack, but it's not going to get you from 0 to 100K, but it can get you from 250K to 600K quite efficiently. So that's one application. With bid caps, you have kind of like a very similar vibe of the cost cap, but is more strict. That's the only difference. So where in the cost cap, like I explained before, you can have a fluctuation of cost. In bid cap, you're not going to have that. So it's going to be like either this cost or nothing. So either you get me either you get me a cost per purchase of $50, or you don't get me any purchases. So that's what you're telling Meta to do. Again, like a very interesting strategy. I think bid caps are great if you want to maximize the efficiency and you really cannot afford to go above the target cost that you have. Then is a good way of keeping costs under your target. And I think they're very interesting, very similar application to cost caps, which is really cool, but is a little bit more strict. So you can use that if you know 100% like your break-even point and you have a one product store. I think it would be interesting for you to use this as a test. I wouldn't use it for testing. I would use it for scaling. Same thing. And the last one is not a target cost. It doesn't exist anymore. Is the cost cap. Now what you have is a ROAS target as well, which is very similar to the cost cap, but the target is on a return on ad spend instead. It's very similar to the max value and the max conversions, kind of like they're not bidding strategies, but they kind of are, but very similar to that. So with target ROAS, you would have a ROAS target, let's say that is like 3 or 2, whatever, and then you tell Meta, I want you to get results that average on this ROAS. And that's also very interesting. Personally, I have used it before. I haven't seen great results for many brands. It tends to nearly always underperform or underspend like massively. So it's not something that I've used massively before, but it's something that you should experiment with and see if it makes sense for you. My experience with it is that even if you go from, for example, a bid from £10,000 a day to £20,000 a day, it tends to not even get close to that. So it will spend like 10% of the budget if it spends at all. So I haven't had much luck with it, but it's definitely something that you should try and see if it makes sense. So if you have any other questions about bidding strategies, then you can join the community that I have below. It's completely free, and my mission here is just to give e-commerce advice that is free and accessible for everyone. I think there is a lot of misunderstanding in the Ecom community, and there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad, and I want to be for the net positive rather than the net negative. So if you want to consume more content like this, but in a more structured way, then you can join the community. It's 100% free, and I'll see you on the other side.